Good. So, very warm welcome. Many, many faces I don't know, which is lovely. And warm hello to those I do know. In case some of you did not receive our message, at the last minute, Danny was not able to meet today. So we've postponed that dialogue. I'm not sure if everyone knows that. And we were going to cancel altogether. And then first thing this morning, my wife said to me, "Why don't you talk about devotion?" And it was one of those invitations that I couldn't say no to. Scary though it is, actually. Scary in the sense that I can only do at least a whole part of this by speaking very personally, and not in a way I've necessarily spoken publicly. But it also feels very right given the time that we're in. So I'll speak a bit and then we'll have some dialogue. And actually, I'm going to start with a quote from my book, which I remembered, and it's just so totally appropriate for today. And it's actually from right at the end. And the section of the book is called The Return from Exile. And it starts like this. Perhaps the most painful suffering we have unwittingly created is the loss of sacredness in our lives, the loss of awe regarding the mystery in which we are enfolded. I again quote Einstein. This is Einstein. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. To know that what is impenetrable for us really exists and manifests itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, whose gross forms alone are intelligible to our poor faculties, this knowledge, this feeling, that is the core of the true religious sentiment. In this sense, and in this sense alone, I rank myself among profoundly religious men. And I continue by saying, I confess that in exactly that sense, I too am and always have been a deeply religious man, looking to find how to live that sensibility in our secular world without becoming entwined with traditional forms and dogma. So one of the contexts for this is that it's long seemed to me that as we rejected, for good reason, many of the traditional forms and dogma of the great legacy religions, we actually threw the baby out with the bathwater. That's felt very clear to me. And it's left us collectively, and obviously it's not true for everyone, but it's left us collectively with this horrendous secular ceiling. And the more that ceiling opens, the more horrendous it looks to realize what we have collectively agreed to live in, this secular ceiling, within which there is this huge egoic sense of separate self, and in many instances, precious little sense of connection to something, anything, anything beyond that separate sense of self. And that, I think, is a catastrophe when we really look, because it's reduced life to the absence of connection on the deeper level. I've spoken many times, those of you who've been on previous calls, I've spoken many times about the disconnection we live in. This is a deeper level that I'm talking about today. It's not just a disconnection from our bodies, our emotions, our intuition, even from the transcendent. It's a deeper level of disconnection from that which we can call the sacred, for want of a better name, that which we can actually give many different names to. And it doesn't matter what name we give to it. The G word is very problematic for me too, because it comes with so much baggage in our cultures. But as I heard someone very wise say recently, he was saying that he was in London and he was walking around and he was struck by how many wellness centers there are. And every single one was missing the most important thing of all. Isn't that interesting? Wellness, 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 wellness for the separate self, while missing the single most profound and important aspect of all. Wow. Wow. When you look at it like that, that's a wow. And that's exactly where our culture has got to. And it's very interesting. It's always because I've studied the zone for many years, what in sports is called the zones, or in arts would be called the flow state, or in life is called the flow state. And it's always struck me, and it was one of the things I'll talk to Danny about when we do have our dialogue, because he knew in his career the flow state, the zone, more than many sports people, and we've had amazing conversations about it. And there's a brilliant book, actually, I don't have it here, written by the founder of Esalen, Michael Murphy, long time ago, about 30 years ago, called In the Zone, The Psychic Side of Sports. Not a great title, but that's what he called it. And he interviewed hundreds of sports people. And what he found was, without exception, they all had extraordinary mystical experiences. And secondly, they were afraid to talk about it because our culture has no context for that. And that's as true now as it was then. I mean, it's a breathtaking book. It's page after page of wow, in every single sport. Weightlifters, Olympic weightlifters, who said that they're willing to go through what they go through because every so often they have an experience of pure light. Wow, pure light. In group sports, many experiences that are completely out of the ordinary. And it's also long seemed to me that it's another symptom of our deep imbalance now, that those experiences are considered exceptional. It's fascinating. It's like we live most of the time not in flow, and being in flow is like an incredible experience. But what if it was the other way around? What if it became totally natural to live in flow? And occasionally we go out of it and we think, oh, okay, all right, well, it'll come back. And it's so interesting, arts as well. You look at great musicians and you see what a profound state they're in as they're playing. And you understand, and many of them who are more conscious speak about it, that they are in a state of deep surrender. They understand, any real artist understands that you don't create art. You become a vessel. You become a vessel for creation. And yet, even in the arts world, there's a ceiling. My father was a very great film producer and produced many classic films and was part of a very high creative group of filmmakers in the 70s and 80s. And they too had a secular ceiling when I look back. They reached the pinnacle of creativity, but there was a ceiling. There was a ceiling that they didn't want to go beyond because it was associated with religion. So in a way, the big question is, how can we retrieve the baby that we threw out with the bathwater, but in a way that is entirely appropriate for us now? And one of the important things about that for me is to say that the retrieving of that has nothing to do with belief, nothing whatsoever to do with belief. Because if we bring in the whole domain of beliefs, we get into very troubling territory. I believe this, you believe that, so we're already separate. The baby that we threw out with the bathwater only comes back in the realm of direct experience, which also brings a kind of knowing that has nothing to do with believing and actually very little to do with thinking. It may come more strongly actually when the mind goes completely quiet. And that can happen in many, many ways. And of course, we know that in the corporate world and the world in general, we're so busy in the doing, what you'll have heard me describe before as the forward circle, that there is rarely enough moments. There are rarely enough moments to sit in a deep listening receptivity. And yet all the leaders, the great leaders I know and have worked with, know that they have to make those moments. Actually, I was talking recently with a friend who was CEO of a big airline in England, and they were in major, major crisis at the time. It was in the newspapers, and there was a particular day when he had to make a really big decision. And his whole team were in complete turmoil and anxiety, and they were coming to him. And he said, "I'm going out for a walk." And they were like, "What? Are you crazy?" "I'm going out for a walk." Any leader who is a real leader understands that there are moments when you have to let something arrive. But there already we're in a completely different paradigm. We're in a paradigm where, first of all, we understand that my thinking mind has a big limitation, and I have to learn to be receptive. I have to cultivate a receptivity to something that will come. Who knows where it comes from? We don't even need to know that. But the experience is very clear. Any creativity, actually any new idea. I mean, how come in English we always say the idea came to me? The idea came to me. How many times do you hear people say that? But what's the implication of that? The idea came to me. That there is something beyond my separate identity. And so something comes to me. This is the core of artistic creation. And in sports, it's still the most sought after experience. Teams now work with neuroscientists. I'm passionate about football. Top football teams bring in neuroscientists because they know that, for instance, when you can move the brainwave frequency from beta wave to alpha wave, which is the realm of the zone, it's a numerical frequency, much higher levels of performance occur. And it's fascinating when you read about what's happening when the neuroscientists come in and they work with each player and they help each player understand the things they need to do. It's nothing to do with thinking. It's always an intentional use of your attention. This is why, as I've said many times, our attention is the most powerful superpower we have, how we use our attention, because it's the main way that we distance ourselves from the power of our thinking. The moment I pay attention even to my breathing, and I really sit and pay attention to my breathing, already my brainwave frequency is changing and measurably changing. But that's just the first gateway. Because we also have to understand, I think, that when we look at the, and again, I speak in collective terms, when we look at the collective Western ego identity, a lot of it is about self-reliance and independence. The idea of bowing, for instance, is very alien to a lot of people. A lot of people would associate bowing with a giving up of my power. It's amazing when you start talking to people about that. Without bowing, there can be no devotion. And I remember, again, I won't speak about personal experience. For 2 years, a long time ago, I trained with a Zen meditation teacher. And sometimes we would go into what he called strict Zen form for 24 hours. And apart from silence and no eye contact, one of the structures of strict Zen form, as he presented it, was that any time you passed someone in a corridor, you just stopped and you bowed to each other. Anytime you entered a room, you stopped at the door and you bowed to the room. Anytime you were outside, you heard something like a bird sound, you bowed to that. And it was extraordinary to do that, because after a few hours of doing that, reality began to open more, and the sense of inner being, the sense of inner space, the sense of inner silence grew more and more powerful through the bowing. The bowing. Didn't matter what your mind would say I'm bowing to. It was simply the bowing. In some traditions, that's taken even further. Prostrations. Full body lying on the floor. Prostration in the Tibetan tradition, for instance. And I've always been fascinated by that and didn't really know how to penetrate that. When my wife and I were in Tibet about 12, 15 years ago, we went to the main monastery in Lhasa, and outside it's just a whole lot of people prostrating. And we went back in the evening and we realized the same people were prostrating. They'd been doing it the whole day, and we were like, wow, okay, wow, that's really something. And then we also heard that there are people who come from villages to Lhasa, and it might take them a month or more to come because they do the whole journey via prostrations. Wow. Meaning they prostrate, they stand up, they prostrate, and they stand up. And it can take weeks to do that journey. And then recently I was in Bhutan for an amazing conference, and I was with a friend of mine who's a very high-powered consultant. He works with governments and so on, and he's also a very, very committed Buddhist. And we went into some amazing temple spaces in Bhutan. And whenever we went in, I was suddenly surprised to see him prostrating, full length on the floor. Wow, okay, I see. And I've also had experiences in the not so distant past with, I've been with some very great teachers. I've been with some also powerful teachers who had shadows, but still had powerful teaching. But with one great teacher, I noticed that some people, when they approached him, would prostrate on the floor. And I found that fascinating, and I wondered how, if I could do that, what it would be like to do that. And then comes the whole thing of, but if I'm doing that, am I giving my power away? Am I somehow worshipping someone in the wrong way? But one time, it was, there were situations where you would approach this person and there'd either be a few other people around or no one. And it was an opportunity to approach him. And I said to myself, okay, when I get there, I'm going to see how I feel. And when I arrived there, I naturally prostrated without any hesitation. And then we sat and talked. And there were two people very close to me who were there in the room, so they witnessed this. You didn't hear the conversation, but they witnessed this whole thing. And they know me very well. And one said, that was extraordinary because when you sat with the teacher, I've never seen you be more equal. Wow. Okay, well, that's not what's expected, right? That's not what the mind says would happen. And the other person said, when you sat, there was pure light coming down. Wow. So this is the whole Western concept dissolving because we rightly fear that. We rightfully fear that because if you did that with someone who was not of the highest integrity, it could be very problematic. But this, I knew that there was no question for me about the integrity. So this is, I'm just opening this territory of what does it mean to recover some of the baby that we threw out in our secular world. Some people speak about experiences of light. Some people apparently in their meditation, and there are many meditations which guide you to go up through the crown towards the light. I've never been able to really see the light except twice with another great teacher I was with. Both were in his company. One time was in Israel at the tomb of one of the most famous Kabbalists, Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a real pilgrimage site. And his tomb is there, and you can go towards it and you can put your head on it. And I put my head on it, and there was just pure white light. Pure white light. And another time was in a group setting when we had actually spent a day doing pretty heavy trauma work in the group, collective trauma work. And that particular teacher, Thomas Hubel, many of you will know him. I was very close to him for 5 years. He used to tone, he used to use sound at the end of the day. And he would start, and then the whole group would start toning. And on that particular occasion, within a minute or two, there were cascades of light. And I thought, I must be imagining this. And I spoke to a few other people afterwards, and everyone had had the same experience. So here we are in this secular world, and these doors open. And suddenly we're in not such a secular world. And maybe, you see, for a long time, I also could very easily access deep stillness. So that whole phenomenon of being very quiet suddenly during the day or in the middle of the day, through many, many practices. I can be in London and there's huge stillness inside in the middle of the noise. That's very easy for me. But that still can be within a secular. It's just like, wow, this is this amazing stillness. But then there are more subtle dimensions of that. There are more subtle dimensions. Because you hear many people, if you move in certain circles, many people speak about that there are higher beings, higher masters, higher angelic realms that are assisting us now. And when I hear that, I think, well, that's really nice. That's lovely. But I don't really feel that. I can believe it, but believing it is a bit kind of annoying in a way because it's not really an experience. Whereas for those people, it's an experience without any doubt at all. But that's the threshold that's opened for me recently. And it's been very life-changing, very life-changing to actually know the reality of that and to live in that every day has been life-changing. And I had to go through all my doubt about it. All my doubt had to be really out on the table and allowed, until one day suddenly it was like, okay, a knowing, a deeper knowing. Nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with belief. Just a kind of knowing in the middle of deep stillness and silence. That there are many other forces here. And that these people who speak about that are not just speaking about it. And so on. So I'm just opening these different angles on this topic. Because the fact remains that within the Western ego, we're very fixated on not bowing. We're very fixated on there not being anything I would prostrate to, that I am sovereign. I am sovereign and I have to figure everything out. And I'll go to a wellness clinic so that I can feel better. I'll meditate so that I will feel better. And we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater so long as that's the mindset that we're in. And it's tricky because what does it mean to bring that baby back now in a way that's so desperately needed? And I believe so desperately longed for in many people when we really look. What does it mean to bring that back, but without resorting to beliefs, without resorting to dogma, but to actually rest in the kind of knowing that all traditions have always spoken about, that has nothing to do with belief, but that is a much more direct form of knowledge. Because that ceiling that we live in condemns us to a kind of ultimate aloneness, an ultimate sense of separation, an ultimate sense of exile. And we suffer within that. We do everything possible to try and feel good, understandably, but at the core, there's a terrible emptiness. Part of that, of course, is the whole realm of trauma, which I've spoken about a lot, and we need to do that integrating work. And part of it is this alienation, which is much more of a soul alienation, the soul longing to come home, to feel this deeper sense of being at home in the world, at home in nature. And it doesn't matter what words we use, whether we say, I want to feel one with the intelligence of nature. I want to feel one with the Tao. I want to feel one. I actually just want to feel one, not separate, one. And that's why I've also spoken so often about the need to integrate all the parts of ourselves, from the most unconscious, traumatized parts to the highest parts, because any part that we're not integrating means we're not one. We're already fragmented. I've also spoken about the fact that there are, broadly speaking, two spiritual paths, one of which says, well, all the light is up there, therefore our work is to keep going up there. And there are long, old traditions that are in that path. And then there is another path which says, yes, much of the light is up there, but at least half of the light is right down here in what we call the darkest places. And then maybe it's our work in this incarnation to marry that light up there and bring it right down here, so that in the end there's no separation between up there and down here. Or as Rumi said, one of my favorite quotes, live in the nowhere that you come from, even though you have an address here. What does it mean to live really, really, really fully in our address here, while also being connected to the nowhere that we come from? Oh, my hand went up. Um, so maybe we'll just take a few minutes quiet, and then I'd love to hear from you how this is sitting in you, how this is landing in you. But let's just take a few minutes quiet. And as we've done before together, to begin by taking our attention down into the body. To notice our breathing. And to make physical sensations for a moment the foreground of our attention, that we choose intentionally to pay attention to our breathing. We're not trying to stop thinking, we're not trying to do anything other than pay attention to our breathing and to all the sensations in our physical body. Our sitting, our legs, our feet, and to notice how it is if we intentionally soften and relax the out-breath. And then we can also include in our attentional field all the sounds that we can hear. And then we can think for a moment about what devotion means for us. Like, what are the moments when you experience a quality of devotion, which can happen in many domains, but where you're completely giving yourself to something? Could be to cooking, could be to walking in nature, could be to really, really listening to someone with your whole being. Open, radically open, is right at the core of devotion. I'm one with whatever I'm doing. That's right at the core of the flow state, of being in the zone. In sports. There's no longer two, there's only one. I give myself completely to the experience, whatever it is. I'm not standing aside thinking about it. I'm experiencing it with my whole being. That's devotion. How do you experience devotion? When do you experience devotion? Another word for which we could say is love. When we give ourselves to something totally, that's also love. When I listen to you with all my heart and full radical openness, that's pure love. I'm not needing you to be anything other than exactly what you are. When the mind goes quiet and I listen to sounds, I listen to nature, I listen to the sound of traffic, then I can also be in devotion, in oneness. Just the breath. Nothing to understand, nothing to figure out. What a relief. Nothing to figure out, nothing to understand. Thank you. Good. So please, if you'd like to share, just raise your hand electronically because I won't see everyone if you can do that. And please share whatever is in your heart. Ted, just unmute yourself. Lovely to see you, Ted. Just unmute. Yeah, no, not yet. I can't do it for you, or maybe I can. I don't think I can. Somewhere on your screen, there's an unmute. You might be able to do it. Let me just check.
There we go.
Ah, there we go. Great.
Hey, Nicholas, it's good to see you. Thank you for sharing. It's my first time in the Matrix with you. And I'm totally excited about what you're sharing in my life about being present with another person as a
Right.
way of entering the flow state. I've been a therapist for 40 years, seen thousands of couples, and
Mhm.
been married for 55 years, and entered the flow state many times with my partner. Uh,
Right.
I look at the image behind you on the wall, and there's two circles overlapping, with I can't tell what's in the middle, but it sort of could be a heart. And I think
Mm,
that when two people enter the space of awe by listening to each other
right.
and going deeply into just being instead of figuring things out and solving problems, they enter a really special state with each other that you're talking about that excites me.
Yeah. Yes.
I think for me, with my wife, when we finally, after 45 years of living together, started using just changing speakers, listening to each other with some kind of time agreement, like 2 or 3 minutes.
Mm,
We knew that there was going to be an end to the to the person talking, and it allowed us to open up a whole new realm of really listening and being listened to.
right.
It was so simple that it's deceptively simple. And I
Mm,
just wanted to share that that was been one of the most profound experiences in my life was to
mm,
realize after 45 years of really, pretty wonderful marriage that there was this other realm that is
yes.
in the area that you're talking about of devotion. So
Mm,
I just had never heard it described that way in an interpersonal uh, connection like that way. There's
right.
other ways to meditate and to be with teachers, but in
Right.
the personal realm, I think it's exciting that you're talking about that for me.
Mm. Thank you, Ted. That's really beautiful how you speak it. Thank you. And of course, because I'm also operating a lot in the leadership context, leaders who really know how to listen are very, very precious
Yeah,
in their field and begin to be what I would call a blessing.
thank you.
And it's very interesting when you talk to all the many people I talk to, and you ask them, do you remember the leaders
Mm,
who really, really listened to you, even for a minute?
mm.
Everyone can remember those leaders. And they aren't, they're the rarity rather than the majority. Yeah. Relational presence. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just one last thing. It's interesting how people that love each other or began loving each other have really often not been able to stay in the listening zone over
Right.
and therefore suffer a disconnection from, I think, the sacred that lies not in solving problems, not in fixing whatever they're upset about, but just really being listened to is
Yes.
what most of us want as children. Just being really listened to, just being seen.
Right.
So anyway,
Right.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely. And I'm in a marriage now for 26 years, and it's the same with people who you work with regularly,
that.
is to not let the other person become a habit
Yeah, yeah,
and to be always in discovery. That's the challenge. How are you today?
yeah,
Tell
yeah,
me. And I want to hear. I really want to hear because you're not the same as you were yesterday.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Well, I'm excited that your leadership skills for leaders of companies also has a really wonderful place in the world of family relationships, not just
absolutely.
partners, but with
Yes.
parents, kids, with kids and kids. It should
Yeah.
be part of our educational system to learn how to listen well.
Yeah. Totally. And I
So,
regularly hear from leaders who do a training with me that they'll call home and they'll have a totally new kind of conversation.
yeah,
Interestingly, as well, I often hear someone say the next day, I called home and actually I didn't say very much, but I really listened. And at
yeah,
the end, the other person said, wow, thank you. That was an amazing conversation.
yeah.
And it,
I
and the
love
person,
that. I
I
love
didn't
that.
do it. I was just listening. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
I think the surprising thing, as I said earlier, is if they would just use a 2 or 3 minute timer and
Right.
just so
Right.
they knew
I
there was
love
going to
that.
be an
I
end.
love
It's much easier to listen if you know there's going to be an end.
that. That's such a gift you bring. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thank you, and
Thank,
thanks, Nicholas, for today. I really resonate with everything you're sharing. I guess I kind of felt compelled to share a little bit of a personal experience with devotion and
mm,
noticing the qualitative difference for me from when I was a younger man, trying on maybe a kind of more external and outside in approach to devotional practice. So, you know, that story about prostration,
right.
you know, I've had experiences like that in Buddhist contexts, and somehow for me there was always actually a sense of separation in that process,
Mm,
trying to kind of try something on. Like it's almost like
yes.
you're wearing clothing. And as I've deepened into my own embodiment practice over the last decade or so, and become much more accustomed to a much deeper level of listening and actually of being guided,
Mm,
the kind of softening that comes with that
mm,
allows your body to, or I've noticed, has allowed my body to begin to, you know, follow its own inclination. And over the last year or so, I've noticed that part of my practice is a kind of natural falling to my knees, a softening of
mm,
the hands, and
mm,
a kind of softening of these nests of the shoulders, and and
mm.
and with that, a softening of the heart, and that is a devotional practice that has
Absolutely.
emerged, uh, well, is emergent. It hasn't been kind of taken from the outside and tried on. It's an inside out experience for
Mm,
me. So
mm,
I just thought there was, yeah, it's been a very interesting learning experience for me to allow myself to to offer myself to life
mm, mm,
without any kind of decision in that process, just a
mm.
following what's being asked. So that's what I wanted to share.
Beautiful, Dan. Thank you. Thank you, the way you speak this. And I also hear and feel in what you say, you articulated it at one point, the sense of the body softening.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, you moved on the screen. Where are you
Oh,
now?
did I? I don't know.
Oh, there you go. There you are. Yes, someone, yeah. Yes, the body is softening.
Yeah.
And this again is something that is a very much a core of my work and has been for 40 years and is ongoing.
Yeah.
What it means to really, really come home to the body. And I've
Yeah.
been doing it 40 years, and I'm still astonished by when the next step seems to open.
Yeah. Absolutely. It reminded
As
me.
part of the, not as part of the dissolving of the separation that was so chronically.
Yeah. There was just the line from that Mary Oliver poem came to me,
Mm,
letting the, you know, the soft animal of your body know what it
yeah,
loves.
yeah,
There's something very
exactly.
true about that.
That's such a beautiful line. And you probably, I'm sure you know the beginning
Yeah.
where it goes, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Amazing. And it keeps opening. Even I've just remembered I went to buy food this morning in the supermarket and I noticed that my hand would go to something on a shelf and then it would come back. No, it's not the right food. And I was like, wow, oh, okay. Like a different compass. It was quite beautiful to experience that. Mm. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Offering. Very beautiful how you say that. And again, this sense that to the normalized Western egoic identity, offering is a kind of anathema. And I think we really need to see that prison that we create. Yeah, thank you. Alexandra.
Hey, Nicholas.
Hi.
Always a treat. Always a treat. So I do leadership coaching mostly and some strategy work, which is boring, but yeah. um, it's so fascinating to me when I find myself at the beginning of a session where I'm all about, oh, I've got to listen to this person and I've got to understand and I've got to. And I get to a point where I'm listening peripherally to what they're saying, but much more intently to what I'm hearing. You said an idea comes to me. I will say things. I have no idea where it came from. And the more difficult time the coachee is having, the more intently I listen to I have no clue what to say. Please tell me.
Beautiful.
And what comes, the more confounded and I have no clue I get, and if I can get that out of the way and just go, okay, you tell me what comes next, oftentimes is life-changing for the other person. And heaven forbid they ask me, why did you say them? I have no freaking clue. It's so beautiful. It's that trust in the unknowing. In total trust that it's right. It's not just okay, it's right. And it always is. But getting there can be hard.
Yeah. And
Because it can be super scary,
Exactly. And how beautiful that you've learned to trust that, because there are many thresholds to cross in order to trust that.
Yeah.
And it's, I teach transformational coaching, so we're very much in that territory. And sometimes, I'm sure you probably do this naturally anyway, but a core part of it goes back to also what I was saying with Dan, which is that the more our body opens, and linked to that our heart opens, the more we completely feel a client without the cognitive mind being particularly active, meaning I feel all the dimensions of you more than you feel yourself very often. Like I feel the deeper unprocessed emotion that you're carrying, and I feel the bigger version of you that you're still not fully stepping into, but as direct feeling. And that's amazing when we start coaching like that.
It's that feeling of oneness and something else
Exactly.
that imbues us.
Yes.
I have no words
Exactly.
for it, but
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when that happens in a coaching session, we are sitting in what feels like a sacred space.
It's magic.
It's like being in a temple.
Yeah.
That's another word I haven't used, actually, I realize, although it's very much in my mind a lot of the time. We're at the temple spaces, not in a normal religious sense, but in a post-religious sense. Temple, restoring the temple.
Yeah.
Restoring the temple. Thank you. Lovely to hear from you, Alexandra. Right. I love to hear from Alain.
Hi, Nicholas.
Hi,
Nice,
Alain.
nice to see you, and thank you. I really appreciated what you shared with us this morning. And my goodness, if any one of you have the opportunity to have a program with Nicholas, it's a life-changing experience.
Mm.
Thank you, Nicholas. Recently, I had quite an experience in that, relates to what you talked about this morning. I met a lady who's a coach, professional coach, who's been playing a huge part in my coaching journey. And we met in person for the first time. And we had lunch, and it was just one of those moments everything goes well. I mean, in all your energetic centers, the mind, the body, the emotions. And at
Mm.
the end, it was great. When I got back home, I was just sitting down trying to put words on my experience. And I couldn't. So I just decided to carry my question, my inquiry for a while. And then another synchronicity happened. I can't remember if it was the same day or the next day, reading a book. And the author, it was in a book, the author was describing two different visits to the dentist. And at the end, he concluded, was trying to name his experience. It took 3 pages of a book to do that. And he said, the second one, I felt my soul was welcome.
Mm. Wow.
I
Yeah.
said, that's it. Thank
Wow.
you.
Thank you. Beautiful story, Alain. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. How would it be if doctors were invited to meet the souls of their patients? Wow. Thank you. Jeanette, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you very much. And thank you for not canceling, Nicholas. It was
Yeah.
good to be here today. I wanted to share a personal story since you were sharing something personal as well in the relationship to the disconnection and in connection to soul. I was brought up with a dad who was an atheist. And when he was dying, and I was with him, we sat for 5 months knowing he was dying and having the conversations about what does life mean, what does success mean, and what makes us happy, and all those things. And the moment he tried many different ways of coming to a thinking relationship with dying. He was not that old. He was 66 years old, and it felt unfair, and we had to acknowledge all of that. But the moment we accepted that he was going to die, our conversations shifted into completely different. And it was a lot more the experience of connection in a completely different way. It was as if our souls were talking to each other, not our hearts, not even just our hearts or our minds, but there was something where we could just allow the pause, the lingering, the listening to just be present there. And I remember the moment he died, I thought, this is the moment I understand true love.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you. It was just his moment of trying to figure out what the connection with a higher divinity was, and he realized it was a relationship with the self, and I did too. And it actually completely changed my life. I left the fashion business and started learning how to coach for transformation. So, but it was just so beautiful in that moment to
Yes.
just allow and being present to allowing the soul
Mm.
to expand into from that physical world of the human vessel into that open world of just loving consciousness. That was such a gift for me that I could be present to that without fear.
Mm.
And I encourage anyone who can be present to a loved one passing in that way to face your fears around it and just really try to be present in that way, as you were talking about this higher connection that we have lost with whatever spirituality or soul means to us. But that is the biggest gift. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you. Wow. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And as we come to a conclusion today, maybe we can just take a moment to metaphorically or literally in our own way bow to presence, to meeting life in radical openness, heart presence, embodied presence, to let go of thinking we have to understand everything and figure everything out, and remember that there is a much deeper way of meeting and being, and that is the beginning of restoring the temple. Thank you all so much for your presence. Thank you. Thank you.